Hello, this is Daryl at 10 Foot Truck Good Attitude Services. It's December 22nd, Sunday. It's a nice and cool day, but not too cold. It's still just raining and it's like in the 40s. So it's kind of unusually warm for this time of year. We haven't had any snow out here, which is really rare. Usually we've had a couple snowstorms by now. Usually by Christmas we had snow. December out here, the snowiest month of the year is December, and we haven't had any snow here on down here on the valley. But in the mountains, there's obviously you look up in the mountains, there's snow on a higher elevation. But normally we've had a lot of snow down here too, in December, even sometimes in Thanksgiving at time around there, late November. But it's already Christmas, and I looked at the weather, and the weather looks like there's not going to be anything but rain all the way to the end of December. So I got my truck advertised. Been doing some work. Also, I'm doing some deliveries in the car. But I guess what I wanted to talk about is I'm noticing that I use these apps like Load Up for junk removal, and they also have assembly jobs and moving labor. I haven't done any in the moving labor. So I know a lot of people are talking about like a lot of junk removal people on these junk removal forums and groups. There's like a difference opinion. There's a difference of opinion as far as like junk removal. Should it be, if you're doing junk removal as a business, should you be exclusively doing junk removal? So I kind of want to put that out there. Maybe if someone has an opinion on that. I know that a lot of people think that if you're doing a service, you should focus on that service, like junk removal, and that's it, and brand your business as a junk removal. And there are a lot of guys that are very successful out there, and I like the fact that they could do that, just have their junk removal hauling services. Me, on the other hand, I do other things too. So I'm not too far off of what junk removal. I do moving, labor, and I do assembly rarely, but occasionally, and furniture delivery, and then I do yard cleanup on occasion. If a customer needs something that I can do and I'm available, I will go ahead and try to do an estimate and do that service for them, just to keep that customer. But I have seen people say, no, you shouldn't advertise other businesses. Well, I'm noticing like on some of these apps, like for instance, Angie Services, they do a lot of handyman. I've done a couple of jobs for them. These are the apps that you get on your phone for. They have advertised services, and then they find contractors to do that do subcontracting for them. So it's a good way to get in, and I've talked about this before. It's a good way if you don't have advertising money and you don't have and you're just starting out and you don't have the funds to do that. You can get on these apps. They're very similar to Uber, DoorDash, and those kind of apps for food delivery. If anyone's done those, you just sign up. You do your background check. They want your information, your vehicle information. If you're doing vehicles, some of them you don't. Some you just do. You're just doing labor. But if you're doing a vehicle driving delivery, you'll probably have to most likely, give them your information on your insurance and your vehicle registry. Well, that's all that stuff for vehicle stuff. So if you have a truck and you're just starting out and you want to do junk removal or that kind of stuff, I've had good luck. I haven't done a lot of work for Load Up, but over the years I've gotten some good jobs off of that. You just have to, they just present you the jobs. Like for instance, there's one right now. They'll give you the information and the area, and if there's stairs, what the item is, and that. Sometimes I'll have to contact them to get a little more details. Like today, they wanted I didn't have time to do it today. I was already busy, but there was an assembly job. So they are, like I said, they're advertising assembly, junk removal, and moving labor. I believe. I think I've seen moving labor on there. Mostly I've done junk removal there, mattress removals and appliance removal and that kind of thing. But I did see an assembly, and I've done plenty of assembly work. In fact, I think it was about after I had moved, because I was doing exclusively moving labor with friends of mine, and I was using websites for that, and I was using the U-Haul website. I could advertise on there, and then I was also doing a Hire Helper I was using that application, or was on the web. They weren't on the phone at that time. It was just on the internet. I was using them, and then I was using Craigslist to get moving labor jobs, doing U-Haul loads, unloads, pod load unloads, any kind of moving furniture type stuff, labor, without having to provide the truck. So I did that for a long time, but then when I moved out of that area, I didn't have helpers at the time. So I was on my own. I started doing some landscaping, but then I started to look into assembly, doing because there was an IKEA in the area, and the IKEA is very popular back then. I don't know how they are now. We don't have one out here, but the IKEA, a lot of people would buy that furniture. It's in a box. So I went and got a bunch of tools, and I started advertising assembly. And I was doing that for a long time, and I don't mind it. The only problem is, the one thing I had an issue with is the timing. It's like, how long is this going to take? Like, for instance, today there was an assembly job listed for that I could have done, but then I looked at the item. I wanted to make sure that I could fit it into my schedule, because sometimes I've been on assembly jobs that the items can take a long time, a lot longer than you think. I did a bunk bed one time. It was a full-size bunk bed, and it was like 3 boxes full of parts, and all the little intricate parts and things. That took me like 6 hours. It was that many pieces that were all I had to put together. So it took me a lot longer than I thought it was originally. So as I did more and more assemblies of desks, especially like the 6-drawer dressers, bookcases. In fact, I did a whole library, did all their bookcases for a personal library. So I started to get accustomed to how long these things would take. It takes, if you want to do them in the right way, the correct way, following the instructions and doing exactly the way it is, step by step, it can take longer than you think. And if you're not doing it all the time, so you're not accustomed to, say if you're doing the same pieces all the time. Like when I worked at a furniture store, we did the same bookcases every day. We had to assemble the tall and the different size bookcases. Now, after a while, you just get used to it. It's the same product over and over. But when you're going and doing something you've never done before, like the last one, I did a hamper, and it took longer than I thought because I wasn't accustomed to doing those. And this one was going to be a desk, but it had a lot of parts to it. So I looked, and it was going to take longer than I could do it, especially I had to travel out there. The timing wasn't going to be right for my schedule today, so I didn't do it. The other issue I have with this, it's hard, to do the timing, is that a lot of times customers think that it's going to be done quicker, because on the box and the instructions, of course, it's going to say, or website, this is easy to put together. It's not going to take, it doesn't make it sound like it's going to take a long time. But if you want to do it right, correctly, I've come on a lot of moving jobs where people have had that prefab. I call it prefab furniture, assembled furniture, IKEA. There's a bunch of companies that do it. I've come across a lot of moving jobs where people did not put that stuff correctly. They didn't spend the time to do it step by step in a correct way, tightening down whatever it was that you have to do. They just slapped it together really fast. And the problem is it would just, when I start to move, it just falls apart. It's not as sturdy as it should be because it's loose. They didn't put the little connectors in right. They just threw it together. They just figure, just probably didn't read the instructions. So you really want to do step by step and make sure that everything's done correctly if you want that furniture to be even solid enough to where it's not going to move around. And not even some of it's that's just the way it is. But so I think customers sometimes think it's going to take a little bit faster. I've had customers say, how come it's taking so long when I'm doing these assemblies? And so it's harder to get the pay, in my experience. Maybe it depends on the area. I just wasn't getting enough for the amount of time. Now, I don't mind doing it on off times. If I don't have anything, I will. If I'm not busy, I don't mind doing those kind of jobs. It's another option. But like I said, for a long time, that's what I was doing until I could find a helper. When I was doing my furniture delivery, I was just doing the assemblies. So I assembled a lot of different things. I did one whole house. I think it was like about 6,000 square foot house. They had me assemble everything in that house was IKEA. It was like we had to go to IKEA and buy all the stuff. I spent like I don't know if it was a month. It was a long time. I was there every day. We were going and getting the IKEA. Their offices, their library, they had their craft room, their guest room. Every room they had stuff assembled that was pretty much from IKEA. So I got really good and really accustomed to doing those kind of assemblies. Now I like to do them alone because I want to focus on the instructions. I don't like a lot of distractions. There was one time where I had a friend of mine come and help me on that job, and I had pretty much assembled most of the stuff in there already, but there's a few other things I had to assemble. And he jumped in and he just didn't even pay attention to the instructions, was just putting stuff together. I mean, I had to take the thing apart to go back because he wasn't patient. You got to be really patient when you're doing those assemblies, and you got to just focus on the instructions, and you have to do it step by step. They'll have these packages with each section has a letter, so like the A, B, C, D, E, and each one of those bags has the tools that are provided, for that assembly. The tools and the hardware for each one. So if you go from A, B, C, if each section when you're going if you're going down the line, you want to have that bag and not opening that bag, just leave it there until you start doing that section. There was one time when I was doing assembly full time. That was my service before I bought my truck. That I went to assemble a bunch of stuff in a customer's house, and they had a kid, a small child. Kid was there, was in the house with the parents. But the kid decided to start opening these without me looking. I didn't see. I was trying to assemble things. I was looking over here, and their kid was taking apart these hardware bags and throwing the stuff around like it was a toy. Oh, it was crazy because you can't once like each one of those, some of these little dowels and screws and bolts or whatever they call them, they're specifically made for one part of the dresser or whatever you're assembling. If you have them thrown all over mixed up, it's so hard to find that and to try to get all that back organized. So it took a long time to do that job, and even it was so bad that I had to actually rig one of them up, and I told the customer, I'm sorry, but some of the hardware got lost, and I know you don't want to reorder all this, so I had to use screws and stuff. She's like, don't worry about it, just go ahead and get it to where it's working. So that I learned a lesson on that, is you don't want to separate those bags. You want to go step by step on those assemblies. So anyway, and then I just recently did another assembly not that long ago, and it was just a small item, and I thought it was just a filing cabinet. I thought, well, this will be easy. It wasn't. There was there's sometimes you get into a position where there's the parts are not machined like exactly. Maybe they're just a little bit off or something, but I was having issues putting that thing together. But so you run into things like that. Sometimes parts are missing, so it's not as easy, it's not as fast, especially if you're doing it as a service. You got to be patient. So I don't do those very often anymore. But they do have them, like I said, that was available today, but I didn't have the time. I was already booked today. And so, but we'll see if another one comes up. Maybe I'll do it just kind of go about. Sometimes it's a good experience to learn different things, learn different types of items that are assembled. Another thing about assembled furniture like that is it doesn't transport very well when you're moving long distance, depending on how you pack it. So sometimes when I talk to a customer about these assembled items that are like that from IKEA is that they're not the sturdiest items. It depends on what item. Some of the dressers, I've had bookcases that are very sturdy, but they're not as sturdy as your, traditional furniture. So when you're moving it, you want to be very careful because they can break because it's made out of press board and all that. I have a bookcase. I don't know if I filmed it before, but I have a bookcase that I bought years ago. I think it was like, 30, I don't know. Could be close to 30 years ago. I've had that bookcase. I've carried around in all these different apartments and places I move in different cities. I've had that thing for that long, and it's still together and good. And it's one of those you assemble. It's a prefab bookcase. So sometimes they last a long time, but for the most part, they kind of deteriorate. They're just a press board, and they have the, the it's like the surface over the press board, whether it's plastic or vinyl or whatever it is. It depends on what it is. It can wear through, and then the board gets if it gets wet, it starts to swell up, and some of that stuff's heavier because it is a press board and a lot of glue and that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's a good way to get furniture shipped around. It just comes in a box, so you can have UPS or I don't know if it was Wayfair. I think I did a couple of assemblies for some Wayfair furniture. Even the couches were all in pieces, which was weird. I was surprised at one of the couches I put together how many pieces it was in a box, just because they have to get it small enough to go into it, like a UPS truck. So it's pretty common these days to have that kind of furniture. I don't know how they insure that. I think years ago I remember looking into how moving companies won't insure that kind of stuff because it's so fragile. So I don't know. But yeah, a lot of stuff comes in as boxes, but it's obviously it's more reasonable than going out and buying, solid desk. Now I prefer to go get used. Of course, I get all my stuff free on jobs, but I did at one point I was buying furniture from Goodwill, but I was turning it around selling it because I was buying it for really cheap. And you can find some good stuff, at the thrift store or Goodwill or the Ark. The Ark has good stuff. These, these places that people donate stuff. So sometimes you can just go find something like that that's used and maybe even just as reasonable as something you're going to order in a box. So, and you don't have to assemble it. But so that's just kind of my rant or whatever. Just talking about assembly work because I saw that. I think I've talked about this before, but that's about it. I think. It's gonna be Christmas holiday, so I'm not really working. Well, tonight I'm gonna go out and do some delivery. I got a schedule for DoorDash. I'm gonna go do that. Maybe I'll do a video on that. That's a good alternative way to make money if you have a car. It's best if you have a good gas mileage car for that. And there was a bunch of. I also signed up for Sempex, which does a delivery. I've done one delivery for them. But I noticed that a lot of their deliveries lately I think they're Lowe's, and I think most of them I've seen are Lowe's or the tire deliveries. But they require a truck. It says on there it requires a pickup truck, not a car. So I would have to take the box truck out. But when I look at the payouts, it doesn't make sense because for me, when I go out in the box truck, I can't even drive out of the driveway here with my box truck for anything less than $125, and that's a low price. That's a good discount price for any kind of items. One item, two items, doesn't matter. Just the base price I have to. And that has to be within this area. It can't be, where I'm going into another town. Oh, that was another thing I was going to talk about. Yeah, I forgot. This might be a long video. Sorry. Outside of the assembly, I was going to talk about because I was looking at this assembly job and that they're doing on this junk removal app, LoadUp. They have assembly, moving labor, and all that. But a lot of the junk removal are because I live in an area that has a lot of these rural towns out, little small towns all around, and they're, very small towns. And I noticed that a lot of these jobs I can't do them because they're pretty far away. I have done one when they increased the price. They needed me to go do it, and I went and drove out to do it, and they gave me extra money to go do it. But I don't tend to go that far distances. I've seen a couple last week. They were pretty far. The payouts were good if you lived in that area or close by. Not for me because of the driving. But one thing I wanted to mention though is if you're a lot of people who do junk removal, if they're advertising that service, if they live in a smaller town, they probably don't tend to. There's not a lot of. In fact, some of these smaller towns don't have any of those services. That's why they're looking for people here to go do it. But if you're in those towns and you have a pickup truck, you're living out in a little small town in the rural area, and you have a pickup truck or a van or something like that, or access to one, you might want to sign up for these apps because this app, unlike the franchises like 1-800-JUNK and College Hunks, they have to have, I'm pretty sure they have to have a certain amount of demographics, a certain amount of population, and they look at the demographics before they'll establish a franchise in a region, the bigger companies. So those companies, even though they're across the United States, everywhere, like 1-800-JUNK, they don't have them here because our demographics aren't big enough. We have College Hunks here, but 1-800-JUNK's not here probably because the demographics aren't, there's not enough population. You get into these smaller regions, there's no way that you're going to get, the smaller these towns, they're not going to have these franchise opportunities. And then also maybe people in those areas are not as accustomed. Maybe they don't have a Craigslist. Maybe the region isn't listed on Craigslist. I'm not sure, but they but this app here, I've noticed that over the years I've been using it, is they advertise, they're not bound by a city or a region. It's like they'll have jobs. I've seen jobs listed in Montana, in like some way up in the middle of nowhere. Like someone wants something removed, and they're paying a lot of money. Like it's more money than they would pay. Like I've seen mattress removals for like a couple $100, or way up there, maybe 300. Whereas if it was here, it'd be a lot less. So the customer is going to pay more, or I don't know if that's the customer paying more or the company paying the contractor. But I'm thinking, well, if you're living out in these little areas and you need some side work, it might be good just to sign up for these apps, or at least this app for Load Up. And it may not be all the time, but there are some areas. There's a region down south. It's a smaller town. I've seen that they've had a bunch of jobs, quite a few jobs come up in that area. And I don't think there's a lot of competition like junk removal companies there because it's a small region. So you never know. I mean, if you signed up, you have your truck and happens to come up with one of these pretty simple jobs, they're not that big, for pretty decent payouts, it might be worth it as a little side gig. So it's interesting how they're able to market because of the way the app's structured, and how they're marketing probably on Facebook and different social media sites. And everyone nowadays, doesn't matter how far out in the middle of nowhere you live, you got a cell phone and you got cell towers, and you got access to your cell phone, smartphone. So they can market to anybody, anywhere, like any town, any region in the middle of nowhere, in these little small regions. So that's interesting, because that could, that's good, because it's also getting people in those small areas to be accustomed to hiring those services through them, and then having service providers do that for them in a smaller area. Whereas these, like I said, these franchise companies, they're not going to ever hit those areas. Like I don't think 1-800-JUNK, I'm just using that as an example, as a franchise. If there's a town out here with 100 people or 500 people, maybe even 2,000 people, they're not going to have a 1-800-JUNK if they're that far away from the city. I don't believe, maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about this. I don't think that 1-800-JUNK is going to drive 100 miles out to 150, 200 miles out to a small town to help someone remove their junk or whatever it is, whatever their mattress or whatever they need removed, especially a smaller job. They're not going to do those. I mean, it's too far. It doesn't make sense. But with this app, if they're able to get anybody interested who has a truck in those areas to contract with them, or to through their app, they can build a network anywhere. I mean, they can have any little town anywhere, no matter how far they are from a city, provide that service if there's someone in there that they can sign up for that. But I'm sure that's what they're trying to do. And sometimes if it's worth it, I'll go further out. But for the most part, I won't go into those regions. I'll stay in my region. But I just thought that was an observation that I thought was interesting, because so many people focus on, if they're expanding their business, so they focus pretty much on this franchise idea of franchising their company. When these apps, they don't have to operate that way, but they don't have the overhead because they're contracting. And they can go and they can market because of the phone. Now everybody has that availability. They can market everywhere, any town, any part of any state. They aren't bound by those borders or by the way that the franchises work. So it's just something interesting I thought. But before I get off this video, I don't know if anyone will listen this far along at 25 minutes, but I'm just kind of randomly talking. I didn't have any planned thing to say about what's going on. I just decided to talk about my thoughts on services, junk removal, assembly, apps, franchises, independent businesses, whatever you're doing. There's always an opportunity for you. You don't have to be full-time. You don't have to be even part-time if you want to do it once in a while. If you have your truck and all that, and you're not having to spend so much on marketing, it's just a good side job. It's a good full-time job. It's a good opportunity for people who need extra money on the weekends. Whenever it's just good. You don't have to build your business to this massive, franchise or any of that. If you want to, that's great. But if you don't, you can just use it as a side job. So you can use the apps, you can use Craigslist and Google and all these to get your business. There's so many different ways and so many different YouTube videos and companies that are doing it. It's just endless amount of ways of doing this kind of stuff. I'm always watching videos and learning and trying to learn on how people are doing their services. And I have my restrictions. I don't do certain types of jobs. I don't do hoarder houses. I try to avoid all those really big, messy jobs where other companies will do that. I prefer to stick with storage cleanouts, house cleanouts, garage cleanouts, etc. Furniture removal. I try to stick with those smaller little jobs because of the size of my truck and the fact that I don't have a big crew, and I don't really want to get a big crew. So there's room for everybody in this business. You can go be a really small guy with a pickup truck, or you can be a guy who rents U-Hauls, or you can be the franchise guy. All these different ways of doing it. So I think it's just a great way to make money if you're looking to, and if you like that kind of work. Anyway, it's getting late. Well, it's not late. It seems like it's late. Actually, yesterday was the shortest day. I think we were going the other direction, so it's going to get light. It's going to stay sunlight a little bit later every day. First day of winter was yesterday. That's 21st. So anyway, have a great Christmas, Merry Christmas holiday. If I don't get back on here, I know this is a long video. I don't even know what I said. I just was talking. But if you want to watch the video, that's great. If you don't, that's fine. Have a great day. This is Daryl, Good Attitude Services, signing out.